Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, President Trump's warning to Hamas, stop the violence or face eradication. Plus, analysis from Hillel Neuer from UN Watch on the anti-Israel bias expressed in meetings of the UN Human Rights Council. And God in the tunnels, how an IDF engineer experienced divine protection in the midst of war. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. President Trump believes the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel is still holding, but some believe the Trump Gaza plan could be in danger of falling apart. Here's the latest on these and other stories. U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff and White House advisor Jared Kushner arrived in Israel to help keep the ceasefire alive. The IDF announced it resumed the ceasefire Sunday evening after Israeli forces responded to a Hamas attack that killed 2 soldiers and wounded 3 more in the southern Gaza Strip. The IDF struck dozens of Hamas terror targets. President Trump told Fox News there's not a timeline to disarm Hamas.
Not a timeline, not a hard line, but we're going to see how it all works out. They've lived there for a long time. They're very violent. As you understand, you've been covering it for a long time, but we're going to find out. So it's not a hard timeline, but it's a line in my own mind. And at a certain point, if they don't do what they're supposed to do, then we'll have to do it for them.
Since the ceasefire, Hamas leaders have openly stated they will not disarm and want to be part of a post-war Gaza. The Trump plan says Hamas must disarm and can't have any role in Gaza after the war. Hamas is also enforcing its rule in areas where Israel has pulled back by executing its rivals, extorting local businessmen, and often displaying their weapons. Hillel Neuer, director of UN Watch, tells CBN News the world has been silent on Hamas's vigilante justice.
I put up a video a few days ago on social media, and it said, here's the reaction of the Human Rights Council to the massacre by Hamas. Hamas is accused of killing possibly over 50 Palestinians who were opposing Hamas, and like a mafia regime, they want to massacre any of their critics or opponents. And the response of the world is crickets. Our video is the sound of crickets.
Neuer says critics of Israel are silent too.
Groups like Amnesty International, many leading activists like Greta Thunberg, the climate Palestine activist, who claimed to care about Gaza, who claimed to care about Palestinians, have been completely silent as Hamas is murdering Palestinians.
If Hamas is allowed to keep its weapons, it may jeopardize the next phase of the ceasefire deal. The Sunni nations of Saudi Arabia and the UAE were expected to be part of an Arab force to monitor the ceasefire in Gaza. However, it's been reported they won't participate if Hamas does not lay down its weapons. Many believe unless Hamas is disarmed and eliminated, it will sabotage any force sent to restore order in the Gaza Strip and block any chance for rehabilitation or reconstruction. Saudi Arabia and the UAE noticeably did not attend the recent peace summit in Egypt and said they warned about countries that destabilize the region, a veiled reference to Qatar that has funded Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood for decades.
Vice President Vance arrived in Israel for a 3-day visit to help take President Trump's peace plan into the next phase. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with Trump negotiators Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner on Monday against the backdrop of Hamas's violation of the agreement, attacking Israel and killing 2 soldiers, and Israel's strong response. Trump warned Hamas to get in line or face the consequences.
We made a deal with Hamas that, they're going to be very good, they're going to behave, they're going to be nice, and if they're not, we're going to go and we're going to eradicate them if we have to. They'll be eradicated.
On the 700 Club Monday, Jonathan Schanzer of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy said Hamas has no intention of disarming.
This is a terrorist organization that's been around since 1988. They don't want to disarm. They don't want to dismantle themselves. They want to stay in power. They control Gaza, or at least they did. Now they control a part of Gaza, but they don't want to relinquish that power. And I think that's very clear. They also exist to destroy the state of Israel.
He also said the Trump administration should be pressuring Turkey and Qatar, who vouched for Hamas and brought the group to the negotiating table.
The United States needs to come down on the Turks and the Qataris like a ton of bricks. This is where the leverage is for Hamas, and we need to get them back into the deal, complying with the deal.
Meanwhile, Israel resumed humanitarian aid deliveries on Monday after the ceasefire in Gaza was reinstated. Hamas returned the body of another deceased hostage overnight. Tal Haimi, a member of the emergency response team, died defending his community, Kibbutz Nir Yitzhak, and his body was taken to Gaza. He leaves behind a wife and 4 children. The youngest was born after his murder. 15 hostage bodies that were supposed to be returned last week are still in Gaza. Witkoff and Kushner met on Tuesday with recently released hostages who thanked them and President Trump for making their release a priority and securing their freedom. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Up next, insights from a UN watchdog group on the inner workings of the Human Rights Council. From Eleanor Roosevelt's humanitarian vision in the 1940s to the current Human Rights Council at the UN, Hillel Neuer from UN Watch explains what happened and how it affects Israel. Hillel Neuer, great to be with you. You're the director of UN Watch. First of all, for people who don't know, explain what UN Watch does.
Well, look, the United Nations is actually a very important institution, whether we like it or not. Its decisions are translated into every language. They affect the hearts and minds of hundreds of millions of people. But who's watching the UN? Who's guarding the guardians? No one. There are no checks and balances at the UN. Enter UN Watch. We're the only outside group whose mission is to monitor the United Nations by the principles of its own charter. If they elect dictatorships to human rights bodies, UN Watch is the first to speak out. If they discriminate in ways that are in violation of their own charter's equality guarantee, we're the first to speak out.
How would you describe what's going on right now in the Human Rights Council?
Well, the Human Rights Council has its origins, which are noble. Eleanor Roosevelt, the great humanitarian of the World War II era, was the founder of what was then called the Commission on Human Rights. Sadly, it went south. It got hijacked. By the year 2003, the chair was not Eleanor Roosevelt. It was the representative of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's brutal Libyan dictatorship. So Eleanor Roosevelt to Gaddafi, the rise and fall of human rights at the UN. They had a reform 20 years ago in 2006. They changed its name to Human Rights Council. And today, where are we with the reform? They just held elections again for their membership, and they elected Egypt, which is a brutal authoritarian regime. They elected Iraq. They elected Pakistan, which is a horrible regime that persecutes Christians and other minority groups, supports terrorists. And a week before, the Human Rights Council elected new experts. One is a longtime Chinese diplomat, and one was an Iranian diplomat. These are experts on their advisory committee. There are democracies there, but they're often in the minority, and often the dictatorships dominate. So a human rights body that was meant to preserve individual freedoms, whose principles are noble, has been largely hijacked by dictatorships, and we need to speak out.
So if you're going to go into the Human Rights Council and listen to these nations talk about Israel, what are you going to typically hear?
Well, you're going to hear a completely distorted picture of what's happening. To say it's a caricature would be to minimize what goes on. It's a grotesque distortion of the reality. Most countries that take the floor end up being apologists for Hamas terrorism. They call that resistance. They accuse Israel of every crime in the book. I would say it's complete demonization. If Israel, as it was attacked on October 7th by Hamas terrorists, massacred 1,200 Israelis, families in their homes, Israel's trying to defend itself from terrorism. Israel gets accused of committing war crimes, collective punishment, ethnic cleansing, and the biggest lie of all, the biggest hoax, genocide. Israel is fighting terrorists that's launched a war, and Israel gets accused of all of these things, also of racism, and typically those accusing it are themselves guilty of many horrible human rights violations.
Final question, Hilla, how can people find out more about UN Watch?
Well, UN Watch has our website, unwatch.org, latest news about the issues we're talking about, the United Nations, human rights, Israel, the Middle East. People can sign up on our our website to get the latest updates. We're also on social media, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, either UN Watch or my own account, Hillel Neuer.
When we come back, in the face of war, the daily reality of the IDF's engineering units on the front lines in Gaza. The phrase war is hell has resonated since William Tecumseh Sherman said it to military cadets in 1879. Israeli combat engineer Levi Davis experienced that firsthand in Gaza. He had just been married 2 months when Hamas's attack on October 7th plunged him into combat.
We were called down to Gaza to specifically deal with tunnels and enemy infrastructure just to blow them up. With all of the tunnels of Hamas, those tunnels have been such a point of so much death and so much destruction and trauma and taking the hostages in, but as our forces being inside, they've used it to come out and hurt our forces. So for 3 months, we were in and out of Gaza every day, and we would have 1 or 2 missions, sometimes 3 or 4 every single day, and we would have to go in, do our work, come out, reload our explosives, go in again, and it was very, very physically intense, not much sleep, many early mornings, many late nights, but there was so much work.
How did you know where the tunnels were?
There's many units inside all the time, moving forward, clearing out streets. And as they were moving forward, they would identify these tunnels or these different places that would need to be dealt with. And they would call us and they would send us the location and they would be there waiting for us.
The work required swift coordination between the tunnel units. But sometimes Davis's group would hit delays that saved their lives.
And me and my friends, we were working on one tunnel, we were about to go to the next one, and just about 20 meters away from this next tunnel that we had already been supposed to be working on, but we were delayed. It literally blew up right in front of us. Thankfully, the Lord really protected us and He delayed us from even getting there.
One day in Gaza, Davis and his team experience a soldier's nightmare, caught by surprise with tunnels and buildings exploding within seconds of each other. But miraculously, he survived.
It was in the center of Gaza, El Bourej. There was a missile factory that was discovered. There was lots of very important equipment that had been smuggled from outside of the country into Gaza. There was about 8 tunnels that were connected. We had many tanks guarding us. We had a lot of people on the ground that were guarding. There was a lot of commotion around this mission. Suddenly, my machine that I use every day to pump in these explosives suddenly stopped working. I did everything I could do in my power to fix it. I called technicians, I tried to do all the regular things, and I finally figured out what the problem was, and there was something loose in the air pressure, and I just tightened it, and I was about to flow the explosives into the tunnel. And suddenly I hear the explosion. I look to my left, 20 meters there, the tunnel that was just north of us, everything, 2 tons of explosive in the air, 50 meters that way, another one, and many more around us that I didn't see. It was just shocking to see it so close, and suddenly the rocks are falling, and I was hit with a big block in my neck that actually paralyzed me for about like a minute. I couldn't move, and I thought that was it. I thought I was gonna be paralyzed, but after about, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 seconds, I started to feel tingling in my body, and I was back up on my feet within a minute. I was there with about another 4 teammates, but quickly we were on the comms trying to get our officer, and he wasn't answering, and there was ones from our team that had got wounded from the rocks and from the wave that came from the explosion. So we were helping them, and others were going to see what was with others, and very quickly we found out that there was 4 more of our teammates that were really badly wounded and 2 of our teammates that were killed.
The questions were inevitable. Why did he survive and his friends didn't? Where was God in the battle?
I know so clearly that He's kept me because He has more for me to do. To be light, to be salt where we are. We need to be walking in that calling, walking in what He's called us to do, using the gifts that He's given us to use. And I think one of the big things in my process of the aftermath and the Lord healing my heart, one of the biggest and the first things that really happened was just Him reassuring me of His presence there, even in that place of death and destruction, that He was there and that He prepared the way before us.
Davis may have sensed God's protection, but he still had to wrestle with battlefield mistakes and forgive his enemies.
There was so many mistakes that happened that day, and I had to forgive a lot. And I don't think I could do it without Yeshua forgiving me and him shedding his blood for me and for forgiving all of those others that I had a hard time forgiving. But until October 7th, I had never really experienced what Yeshua calls us to do in Matthew, praying for our enemies, loving our enemies, praying for those who persecute us. That was just a verse that I was like, oh, that's nice, and maybe I had a bully at school that felt like my enemy, but no, this is a real enemy that wants to kill us, but the Lord died for them too. Just praying for the Lord to show up in the camps of Hamas, in the camps of Hezbollah, and to reveal himself, to open their eyes by his mercy, to allow them to find him. And it sounds so like, why would I pray for my enemy? But it's something that the Lord calls us to do, and I believe it's something that he will use also to heal our hearts.
Still ahead, rejoicing with those who rejoice. Pastor Larry Huch on what it's like to be in Israel as the hostages were being released. The book of Proverbs talks a lot about the value of friendship, the kind that sticks around through adversity. Larry Huch is an American pastor who resolved long ago to be a friend to Israel and to lead others to do the same. That's why it was special to him to be in Israel last week when the living hostages came home. Pastor Larry Huch, great to see you back here in Jerusalem. And I understand this is your 50th time here in your Jubilee.
It's my Jubilee trip. And Chris, it's always good to see you and to be with CBN. You guys are heroes to us.
Well, likewise, the way you stand with Israel. Tell us, you're here in Israel just after the ceasefire deal.
Right.
What's your sense about how things are evolving right now?
You know, cautious, optimistic. Is this really going to happen? Because we're dealing with Hamas. We're dealing with people that have not kept their word before. But, we were just walking the streets of Ben Yehuda last night getting a bite to eat. Mm-hmm. And you say there's a lightness here. There's a joy here that I've been coming for 32 years that I've never felt before. So, I think spiritually the whole world needs to look at what God has done for Israel. He's getting ready to do in all the kingdom of God. Give us a new beginning.
Well, that's really exciting. I know a lot of people were saying just in the last few days they can breathe again because for 2 years they've been literally holding their breath about all these live hostages that were kept in these tunnels and dungeons, basically.
Yeah, and not only the hostages, not only with Hamas, but with President Trump standing with Israel and defeating Iran. I mean, and I don't know, Chris, if the whole world understands Iran and their nuclear ability wasn't just a threat to Israel and the Jewish people, it was a threat to America. Iran called us in America the big Satan and Israel the little Satan. And so with President Trump and the U.S. and Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israel defeating that is huge. And I mean, Americans they don't understand living under a terrorist threat 24/7. Their whole lives. Mm-hmm. Everybody's grown up in that. And we've got friends up in North that since October 7th, all their children go to school underground. Yeah. They play in their playground underground. And all of a sudden, that's gone. It's lifted.
Yeah, and talk about the relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, leaders that seem to be on the same page and really, for such a time as this, to lead Israel and the free world.
They both stood their grounds for the sake of America, for the sake of Israel, for the sake of the world. I'm a big Winston Churchill fan, and we've got a Winston Churchill for such a time as this in the Oval Office, and we've got a Winston Churchill in the Prime Minister's office here in Israel for such a time as this. And thank God we've got these leaders who are real. They're not being politicians, they're being leaders. And an extremely, as you know, you live here, an extremely difficult time in history. And they stood their ground. They stood up for us, and look where we are today.
After 2 years and where we are today, it's really a miracle. Pastor Larry Huch, great to be with you.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
The Israeli nonprofit Save a Child's Heart is the largest pediatric care facility in the Middle East, transforming the lives of children with heart disease. Its mission is to bring cardiac care to those who need it, regardless of race, nationality, or religion. CBN supports this organization, and here's a success story that CBN Partners made possible.
Valkis first came to Israel from Zanzibar after an Israeli medical mission visited her island and discovered she had a heart defect. She was 6 years old and received life-saving surgery sponsored by the organization Save a Child's Heart. Years later, when Valkis married and became a mother, her daughter Fatima began experiencing familiar symptoms.
And my first child also get that same problem as me. So when come also again to Israel.
It was another successful life-changing surgery for Valkis's family. But a follow-up medical visit led to a frightening discovery.
They came in, it was a big celebration to see all our patients from past years. I did echo for Fatma, and then as an afterthought, I said maybe we should also do an echo for the very healthy-looking brother. And when we echoed him, we saw that he had the same malformation the mother and the sister had.
I was very sad, and I think, will I get the chance? Because in our country, there's a lot of children having this problem.
For Valkis and her daughter Fatima, Save a Child's Heart was a lifesaver. Now, thanks to the partnership with CBN Israel, Valkis's young son Fahim is also receiving the critical treatment he needs.
CBN has enabled us to save more lives every day and continue our life-saving work of providing cardiac treatment to children with both congenital and acquired heart disease. These are things that are not available in places like Zanzibar, where there is one pediatric cardiologist who we trained on the entire island.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. And please keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem and for Israel. I'm Chris Mitchell. For all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.